My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 35, and 2 months ago, I found out that my name was never supposed to be on my grandmother's will. Not because she didn't love me, she did, fiercely, but because my own mother spent years manipulating her to cut me out. Years of staged phone calls, twisted truths, and strategic absences, all orchestrated so that another woman, my perfect cousin Madison, would inherit everything. They thought they'd gotten away with it. They thought I'd walk away quietly like I always did. But they didn't count on one thing. Grandma Eleanor left behind a second will, hidden, handwritten, signed, and meant for me. If you've ever felt like the people closest to you were working behind your back, if you've ever discovered a betrayal so deep it made you question your own memories, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you're ready to hear how I stopped being the obedient daughter and started becoming the woman my grandmother always knew I could be. It all started at the funeral. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. The sky over Ridgefield, Oregon hung gray and heavy, as if the town itself were mourning the woman we were here to bury. Eleanor Whitmore was not a woman easily forgotten. She was sharp, opinionated, impossibly elegant, and for better or worse, the axis our fractured family had always spun around. Her death was sudden, a stroke in her sleep, and while I hadn't spoken to her in almost 6 months, I felt like the earth had shifted under my feet when I got the call. Still, nothing prepared me for what waited at the funeral. My mother, Miranda, stood near the casket with a glass of white wine in her hand, dressed in muted gray, but somehow glowing. She always glowed at funerals. She said it was because she had good funeral skin, whatever that meant. I hadn't seen her in over a year, and the moment our eyes met, she smiled like we were strangers who just bumped into each other at a garden party. And then there was Madison. She wore black lace, tasteful but expensive, and her golden hair was pinned into a soft chignon. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like she'd stepped out of a Vogue spread titled "Mourning but Make It Chic." When I walked up to the front row, she turned toward me, gave me a gentle smile, and reached for my hand. "I know how much she meant to you." She whispered, her voice like a tissue being folded soft, intentional. "She always spoke so highly of you." I wanted to believe that was genuine, but something about the way her eyes flicked toward my mother like she was waiting for approval made me feel nauseated. The service itself was beautiful. A local pastor read poems Eleanor had marked in a journal. A quartet played Claire de Lune, her favorite. Madison gave a eulogy that had the whole room weeping, even me. She spoke about Eleanor's fierce independence, her love of books, her habit of watering her roses barefoot at dawn. Things only someone who'd lived with her would know. And that's when it hit me. I hadn't lived with her, not for the last 2 years. Not since Eleanor had a fall and decided she needed a full-time presence in the house. Madison had been the obvious choice. She was in between jobs, according to my mother, and eager to help. At the time, I was neck-deep in launching my home staging business in Portland and barely making rent. When I offered to come help my mother, said, "Sweetheart, this is Madison's opportunity to give back. You have your hands full." So I stepped back, like I always did. At the graveside, I stood alone. My heels sank into the mud. Everyone else had cleared out, headed back to Eleanor's estate for the reading of the will. I stayed behind. I needed a moment. I needed to tell her I was sorry for not calling, for not pushing harder, for letting distance grow where love used to live. "I should have been here," I whispered, fingers brushing the damp edge of the coffin. "I hope you knew that I never stopped loving you." By the time I arrived at the house, the will reading was already underway. Caleb Hirsch, Eleanor's longtime estate attorney, stood at the head of the grand dining room, his hands folded neatly. The rest of the family sat around the table like vultures in pearls. Miranda sat beside Madison, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, like she'd just finished watching a tragic opera. Madison sat straight and composed, her lips pressed in a perfect neutral line. Claire Caleb nodded. "Glad you could join us." I took the only empty chair, far end of the table near the china cabinet. The whole room smelled like old roses and polished oak. Caleb read through the formalities: donations to the Historical Society, small bequests to friends, staff, charities. Then came the meat of it. "To my granddaughter, Madison Layton, I bequeath the Whitmore house, all its contents, and the family trust, including all remaining investment accounts, stocks, and personal valuables." My ears rang. It was like the room tilted on its side. "To my granddaughter, Claire Whitmore," Caleb continued without looking at me, "I leave the sum of $10,000 to be used at her discretion." That was it. No explanation. No mention of the emerald necklace Eleanor had once promised me. No word about the books we'd read together in the library. Nothing about the rose garden I'd helped her plant when I was 12. Just $10,000, a goodbye check. I didn't hear the rest. My mother caught my eye across the table and gave me a look that was both pitying and smug. Madison avoided eye contact. Afterwards, I wandered the house in a daze. Everyone else was sipping champagne and toasting to Eleanor's memory. I went up to her study. It smelled like lavender and old paper. The leather chair she always sat in was still warm. There were still red pen marks in the margins of the book she'd been reading, The Secret Keeper. I stood in that room for what felt like an hour, staring at the bookshelves, the crack in the corner of the ceiling, the dusty chessboard. That's when I saw it. A small section of floorboard beneath the window that looked just a little off. The color was slightly darker, the grain misaligned. I dropped to my knees and ran my fingers over it. Loose. I slid my nails beneath the edge and lifted it gently. Inside was a hollow cavity. And tucked inside, wrapped in wax paper and bound with a red ribbon, was an envelope. My name was written on the front, to Claire, my true heir. My heart stopped. I didn't open the envelope right away. My fingers trembled as I held it. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, deliberate looping, slightly slanted to the left, like she was always leaning into the truth a little too fast. She always said the pen told on you when you weren't being honest. Eleanor Whitmore was never dishonest. My knees ached from crouching, but I didn't move. I stared at the envelope for a long time, like it might burn up in my hands. Downstairs, laughter echoed faintly. Someone had uncorked another bottle. Madison's laugh rose above the others, lilting and graceful, the kind of laugh that belonged in curated family videos, not crime scenes. 'Cause that's what this felt like now. A crime scene. When I finally opened the letter, my breath caught. Claire, if you're reading this, I've already lost the ability to protect you the way I always meant to. There are things I should have told you sooner. I failed you in that. But I didn't fail you completely. You are my heir. Not just to my estate, but to my values, to my story, and to the legacy I worked my whole life to build. I had to change my formal will under pressure. Miranda, your mother has been whispering poison for years. I saw it. I documented it. But when you love someone, even a daughter who sees you as a stepping stone, it becomes harder to say no than to just give in. But I never meant for you to walk away empty-handed. There is a second will. Dated and signed, witnessed, valid, but hidden because I knew if it was found, it would be destroyed. You'll find it where you once hid the ruby ring you borrowed when you were 10. I pretended not to notice then, but I was proud. You already knew how to keep something safe. Fight for it, Claire. You always knew who you were. Don't let them rewrite that. Love. Grandma Eleanor. By the end, I was crying. Ugly, silent sobs into the sleeve of my black sweater hunched over a secret compartment in the house where I spent my childhood summers. She knew. She knew everything. The manipulation, the distancing the way Miranda had slowly cut me out of Eleanor's life under the guise of what's best for her health. The way Madison had been inserted into that role like a show pony with perfect teeth and a soft voice. The way I was painted as the selfish one for not dropping everything to come help. But the will, there was another will. And if the letter was right, I knew exactly where it would be. I bolted from the study and ran down the hallway to the linen closet on the second floor. My heart pounded so loudly it echoed in my ears. I pulled out old towels, floral sheets, a stack of dusty wool blankets. And there in the far back corner behind a false panel I remembered prying open once as a kid to hide a stupid ring I stole for dress-up. There it was. A sealed envelope thicker than the letter, yellowed but intact, tied with green twine. I sat right there on the floor and pulled out the contents. It wasn't just a letter. It was a full-typed document, stamped, signed, dated 6 months before the one Caleb had read at the table. It named me the sole legal and rightful beneficiary of the Whitmore house, its assets, the family trust, and the entire estate holdings. There were 2 witnesses' signatures. One of them was Eleanor's oldest friend, Lily Morrow, who had passed away the year before. The other was Caleb Hirsch. My breath caught. Caleb had signed this will, which meant he had known, or at the very least he'd seen it before. And yet he hadn't mentioned it during the official reading. He'd read the newer, altered version, which meant either he didn't know this version still existed, or he did, and he'd chosen to ignore it. Either way, I needed answers. I carefully put the original will and Eleanor's letter into my handbag, wrapped in the linen napkin I found in the closet. I stood and smoothed my skirt, catching my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked like I belonged at that dining room table, polished, put together, but inside something had cracked. I didn't go downstairs. I left through the back door. I drove straight to my hotel and sat on the edge of the bed for a full hour, just staring at my phone. Caleb's number was in my contacts. I'd called him once after Eleanor's fall, trying to understand the logistics of her estate, and he'd been kind but curt. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. Claire. I found something, I said, skipping any pleasantries. A will, dated 6 months before the one you read. Signed by Eleanor. Signed by you. Silence. Then where did you find it? In her house, hidden, with a letter she wrote to me. Another pause. Then Caleb's voice lowered. Claire, I'm going to need you to bring that to my office. Tonight. Why not now? Because, he hesitated, because you might not be the only one looking for it. What does that mean? I whispered, already picturing Miranda tearing through Eleanor's desk drawers, or Madison charming her way into legal conversations she had no business being in. It means you need to be careful, he said. Bring it to me first thing tomorrow morning. I'll call in a notary and we'll start the validation process. You didn't answer my question, I said. Did you know this will existed? Another beat of silence. Then yes, I didn't sleep that night. And by morning, someone had broken into my hotel room. They didn't take my wallet, not my car keys, not my laptop. They took the envelope. But they didn't know one thing. I'd taken pictures of every single page. And the war had just begun. I should have expected it. The door to my hotel room was locked when I left and locked when I returned. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was out of place. My suitcase was still zipped. The complimentary bottle of water still sealed. Even the bed was exactly as I'd left it, slightly rumpled like someone had sat on the edge and stood up quickly. It took me all of 5 seconds to realize the envelope was gone. I tore through my handbag. The linen napkin I'd wrapped it in was folded neatly, placed back into the inner pocket like it had never been touched. But the weight of the documents gone. Vanished. A chill rippled through me. It wasn't just theft. It was a message. A silent, precise violation. Whoever had taken it knew exactly what they were looking for and exactly where to find it. And they knew I'd notice. I backed away from the bag like it might explode, chest-tightening, heart jackhammering in my throat. But then I remembered. The night before, somewhere between shock and adrenaline, I'd laid the pages out on the hotel desk and taken photos of each one front and back. I'd emailed the photos to myself, and then just in case I'd texted them to Noah. I wasn't sure why I'd chosen him in the moment, maybe because he was the only person I trusted not to ask questions. Maybe because some part of me still remembered what it was like to feel safe with him. Maybe because I already had a sinking feeling I'd need backup. I grabbed my phone and called him. Claire, he answered groggy. It's 7 a.m. They broke into my room, I said already, stuffing what I could into my duffel bag. They took the will. There was silence on the other end. I still have the photos, I continued, but the original is gone, and Caleb wants me to bring it to him today. You think he took it? No, I think someone else got there first. I didn't tell him where I was staying. I paused, but I think my mother might know. That landed with a thud. I'm coming to you, Noah said, voice sharpening. Text me your address. Don't open the door for anyone. Within 20 minutes, he was at the hotel. Hoodie jeans, baseball cap pulled low. He looked more like a protective brother than an old flame, and maybe that's exactly what I needed. He checked the lock, the latch, even the peephole. No signs of tampering, he muttered. They probably had a card or inside access. I swallowed hard. The concierge asked for my ID when I checked in. But Madison was standing behind me. I didn't think anything of it. Of course she was, he muttered. I handed him my phone and pulled up the photo folder. As he scrolled through each page, his eyebrows raised. This is real, he said. Claire, this will it names you as the sole heir. No trust splits, no clauses, just you. I nodded. It's signed and notarized. And one of the witnesses was Caleb himself. But for some reason, he still read the updated will at the formal reading. Then we need to ask him why. We drove to Caleb's office in downtown Ridgefield. The entire ride, my stomach twisted in on itself. I couldn't stop thinking about the look in my mother's eyes the day of the funeral, so carefully arranged, so smugly neutral. As if she already knew how the story would end. She wasn't the type to get her hands dirty. But Madison, she'd grown up knowing how to get what she wanted without ever lifting a finger. Perfect grades, perfect boyfriend, perfect future. The kind of girl who always got second chances because no one ever believed she needed them. Noah pulled into a metered spot and killed the engine. Let me go in first, he said. You wait in the car. Why? In case this gets messy. I hesitated. I'm done hiding Noah. His mouth ticked into a smile. Then let's go make a mess. We stepped into the law office together. Caleb's secretary recognized me instantly and waved us in. He's expecting you, she said. You must be Claire. He mentioned your name this morning. That was interesting. We walked into his wood-paneled office, the kind that smelled like money and quiet secrets. Caleb stood when we entered late 60s trim silver hair and the kind of firm handshake that meant something in small towns. Claire, he said, I'm so sorry. Let's not waste time, I said, pulling out my phone. I handed it to him. These are photos of the will Eleanor left me. The one you signed, the one no one mentioned at the funeral. He glanced at the images, his jaw clenched. I never thought she'd go through with hiding it, he said finally. She mentioned it once, said she didn't trust your mother or Madison. I begged her to let me file it properly. She refused. She said the only way to keep it safe was to keep it secret. And yet you still read the newer version at the funeral. I had no choice, Caleb replied. That's the only version filed with the probate court. I assumed the original had been destroyed by Miranda or someone else. So you just gave up Noah cut in. You didn't think to look into it to contact Claire. You signed the damn thing. Caleb winced. You don't know what these people are capable of. I raised an eyebrow. Then tell us. He sat down and exhaled. Miranda isn't just manipulative. She's thorough. Every change Eleanor made over the last 3 years came after prolonged visits from your mother. Doctors were replaced, staff turned over, financial decisions were made when Eleanor was heavily medicated for her arthritis. He looked up at me. Claire, I believe your grandmother was coerced. The words hit like a blow. I can help you contest the current, Will he continued. But we need more than photos. We need corroborating evidence, witnesses, context. Otherwise, your mother's legal team will bury this. Where do we start? I asked, already bracing myself. Caleb folded his hands. Did Eleanor ever keep journals, audio recordings, letters, anything to indicate her mental state before the second will was written? I blinked. She did, I remembered them. Tucked behind the books in her library, old cassette tapes in a carved wooden box. I nodded slowly. Yes, I know where to look. The war wasn't over. It was just getting started. The Whitmore library smelled like cedarwood and secrets. I hadn't stepped foot inside it in over 2 years, but nothing had changed, not the arrangement of books on the dark oak shelves, not the armchair by the window with the indentation of Eleanor's spine, not the thin layer of dust that settled gently on every surface, like a veil no one dared lift. It was dusk when I arrived and the house was empty. Madison and my mother were attending some charity gala in Portland, the kind that required designer gowns and fake sincerity. I had checked the society page just to be sure. I had until midnight, maybe 1 in the morning, to do what I came here to do. The tapes. I remembered them vividly. A wooden box carved with vines and initials EW. They used to sit behind a row of outdated encyclopedias. When I was 10, I once tried to take one out, thinking it was some kind of treasure. My grandmother had caught me and said gently, "Some things are private until they need to be known." That line had haunted me ever since. I stood on the ladder, scanning the top shelf. There, behind the Encyclopedia Britannica, set volume AK, was the box, just where she left it. I pulled it down, blew the dust off, and opened it. Inside were 12 cassette tapes, each labeled by hand. Tape 1, October 2019, Miranda's first visit. Tape 2, November 2019, Madison moves in. Tape 3, December 2019, pain confusion control, and so on. I stared at the labels, heart hammering. This wasn't just casual reflection. It was documentation. Eleanor had chronicled everything. She had known. I pulled tape 1 from the case and inserted it into the small cassette recorder still sitting on the side table, vintage, dusty, but functional. I pressed play. Her voice filled the room, soft, slow, a little raspy with age, but clear. It's been 2 weeks since Miranda's first extended visit. I told her I didn't need help, that I still have all my faculties, but she insists. She checks my medications, counts the pills. Yesterday I found my painkillers swapped out for something new, something she said was doctor recommended. I never saw the prescription. I never saw the doctor. I'm documenting this because I feel something shifting in me, around me. There are moments when the world blurs and I don't know if it's the medication or the manipulation. Claire, if you ever hear this, I hope it's because you found what I left you. I hope you know I never meant to leave things this way. Tears stung my eyes. I pressed pause, afraid that hearing more might undo me completely. The tapes weren't just personal recordings, they were testimony, proof that Eleanor's will had been rewritten under pressure, that her mental clarity had been tampered with, that the woman my mother had convinced the world was deteriorating had actually been fighting for her voice until the end. I listened to 2 more tapes cataloging the dates and timestamps. Madison's arrival, the mysterious firing of the longtime housekeeper June, the loss of phone privileges, even small changes, bank passwords, reset, mail intercepted. It wasn't just neglect. It was a slow surgical erasure of control. By the time I reached tape 5, I knew I had what I needed. I loaded the box into my bag along with the recorder and carefully returned the bookshelf to its original state. No fingerprints, no signs of disturbance. I was halfway down the front steps when headlights appeared in the driveway. I froze. Too soon. They weren't supposed to be back for hours. I darted behind the porch columns, crouched low, and peeked around. It wasn't Madison. It was my mother. Alone. She exited the car, slowly, keys in hand, phone to her ear. "No, she hasn't called me. That's the problem," she said sharply. "She's not at the hotel anymore. Claire's up to something." She paused to listen. "Yes, if she finds those tapes, it's over. Caleb won't be able to bury this one." She ended the call and walked inside. My breath caught in my throat. So she knew about the tapes, about the risk. And most terrifying of all, she wasn't surprised. I backed away carefully, keeping in the shadows. As soon as I was out of sight, I sprinted for Noah's truck parked a block away. I jumped in and tossed the box onto the seat beside me. He looked at me, startled. "What happened?" "She's here," I gasped. "My mother. She knows about the tapes." His eyes went hard. "Then it's time we make them public." We drove to his workshop where he kept his video equipment from a past life as a wedding videographer. I handed him the tapes. He didn't ask for permission. He knew this wasn't about vanity or polish. It was about truth. We digitized them one by one, labeled, organized, backed up on a hard drive and cloud storage. Then we sent copies to Caleb along with a summary document and transcriptions of the most damning recordings. It was nearly 3 a.m. when I finally collapsed on Noah's couch. Before I drifted off to sleep, I glanced at my phone. A text from an unknown number had arrived 10 minutes ago. "You're making a mistake, Claire. There are things you don't understand. Stop now while you still can." No name. But I knew who it was, and I wasn't afraid of her anymore. When I woke up the next morning, the world felt sharper. Not calmer, just clearer. Like the fog of grief and confusion had burned off, leaving the jagged edges of reality behind. I stared at the ceiling of Noah's guest room, still clutching my phone like it was a life raft. The message from the night before was still there. "You're making a mistake, Claire. There are things you don't understand. Stop now while you still can." No signature, no number I recognized. But I didn't need confirmation. I could hear her voice in the cadence, the calculation. Miranda never raised her voice unless she was performing. Real threats came softly, neatly, with silk gloves. By 9 a.m., Caleb had called. I listened to the tapes he said without preamble. "It's more than enough, more than I expected." "So what happens now?" "I've filed a motion to pause probate," he said. "It'll trigger a review of both wills. With the recordings and the dated original, we have cause to initiate a formal contest. But Claire, this isn't going to be clean. Your mother's attorney will push back hard. She doesn't know I have the recordings." "She does now. I submitted them into discovery. They'll receive the notice this morning." There was a long pause. "Claire, you may want to prepare yourself. Once this is official, it becomes public record. They'll come after your character, your past, your motives, everything." I didn't hesitate. Let them. After I hung up, I sat on the porch steps with a cup of coffee, watching a single crow land on the power line. The cold air nipped at my collarbone, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't about comfort anymore. Noah joined me with his own mug. "So it's happening." I nodded. "It's war." He leaned against the railing, thoughtful. "I've seen your mother work a courtroom before. She's not stupid." "I'm counting on that," I said. "She's going to play smart, but I'm going to play honest." He smiled, then hesitated. "You want to know something weird?" "Always. Back in the day when I was doing those repair jobs at Eleanor's, she always made me tea, even when I told her I preferred coffee, and every time I took a sip, she'd smile and say, 'Good things take time to steep.'" He glanced at me. I didn't get it until now. I did. She'd been preparing me for this, quietly, patiently, making sure I was strong enough when the time came. 3 hours later, Caleb called again. "We have a problem," he said. "Of course we did." "What kind?" "Your cousin has preemptively filed a countersuit. She's claiming that the tapes were fabricated, that Eleanor was already exhibiting signs of cognitive decline and confusion when they were made. She's also accusing you of coercion and falsifying documents. I blinked. I wasn't even in town when the second will was written. They're saying you manipulated Eleanor remotely, influenced her emotionally, that you planted the will and the tapes after her death. I laughed, too sharp, too bitter. And Madison. What exactly is she contributing to this fictional narrative? She submitted a statement. She says Eleanor told her that she'd made a mistake in a prior will and was correcting it with the new one. I was speechless for a moment. So she's claiming Grandma said all of that to her, off the record. Yes. I'm sorry, but does that sound like Eleanor to you? A woman who cataloged everything from phone bills to grocery lists? I agree with you, but the court will want documentation. You have truth on your side. They have a carefully crafted lie and money to polish it. I hung up feeling like the air had been punched from my lungs. It wasn't just a legal war anymore. It was a smear campaign, and they were just getting started. By the next morning it had begun. The first article dropped in a local lifestyle blog, Air Wars Who Really Deserved the Whitmore Legacy. It wasn't an outright attack, but it was laced with passive-aggressive venom. Sources close to the family suggest Claire Whitmore had a distant relationship with her grandmother in the final years and made little effort to reconcile. Madison Layton, the current heir and full-time caretaker, was reportedly by Eleanor Whitmore's side until her passing. Some say the sudden challenge to the will reeks of entitlement and desperation. I stared at the screen bile rising in my throat. They were painting me as the bitter black sheep, the estranged granddaughter trying to claw her way back into a fortune she hadn't earned. Noah sat beside me, reading over my shoulder. Let me guess, your mother leaked it. Or Madison. They both know how to spin. He looked at me seriously. Claire, are you ready for this? They're going to get uglier. They're going to go personal. I met his eyes. They've already made it personal. The next week passed in a blur of affidavits, emails, legal drafts, and emotional whiplash. My mother's statement to the court was a masterclass in performative heartbreak. I love my daughter deeply. But Claire has always struggled to understand the sacrifices I made to keep our family together. Her recent actions are not reflective of the young woman I raised. I wanted to scream. Instead, I wrote a rebuttal. Every word sharp, precise, undeniable. I included emails, text messages, dates when I had tried to visit and was told not to disrupt Eleanor's rest, records of financial withdrawals, the cleaning staff's testimony, the receipts from her prescription changes, the fact that Eleanor's primary physician had retired 6 months before the new doctor arrived on Miranda's payroll. Bit by bit, I was dismantling the illusion, but I still hadn't told the most important story. Not yet, because I hadn't found the emerald necklace, the one Eleanor had promised me when I was 15, the one she said would go to the granddaughter who remembers where it started. I had no idea what that meant, but I had a feeling that necklace was more than just jewelry. And if I could find it, maybe I could end this once and for all. The Whitmore emerald necklace wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was legend. Eleanor used to say it had been passed down from mother to daughter for 5 generations through wars, bankruptcies, scandals, and marriages that never should have happened. It's not for decoration, she once told me. It's for memory. We don't pass it down to whoever's prettiest or most obedient. We pass it to the one who remembers where she came from. At the time, I didn't know what that meant. I thought she was being poetic. Now I realized it was a clue, a test. And I was running out of time to solve it. The necklace hadn't been listed in the will Madison presented. That in itself was odd. It was easily the most valuable heirloom in the family's possession, appraised at nearly $150,000. It should have been itemized, tracked, protected, but it was missing. Madison, of course, claimed she hadn't seen it since the funeral. When Caleb asked about it in court filings, her lawyer responded that it may have been misplaced or sold prior to Eleanor's passing, which was convenient because Eleanor would have never sold that necklace. She wore it every Thanksgiving, every board meeting, every major family announcement. She died with it in the upstairs safe. At least that's what I remembered. I called the locksmith the next morning and arranged a meeting at the Whitmore estate under the guise of retrieving personal effects. I didn't tell anyone I'd be going there, not even Noah. The less people who knew, the better. The housekeeper, a new one, opened the door with a stiff smile. I'm here for a few keepsakes, I said, showing the court notice that granted me limited access during the probate dispute. She didn't ask questions, just pointed upstairs and left me alone. The safe was hidden behind a false panel in Eleanor's dressing room. I remembered the code from when I was 16, the year Eleanor founded her first investment firm. 1982. The locksmith worked quickly professionally. When the dial clicked and the door swung open, my breath caught. It was empty. No papers, no envelopes, no boxes, no necklace. I turned away so the locksmith wouldn't see the panic flash across my face. "That's all I needed," I said quickly. "Thank you." He packed up and left. I sat on Eleanor's vanity stool, staring at the gaping black space where our family's most treasured heirloom had lived. "Where did you hide it?" I whispered. That's when it came to me, a memory buried and strange. Eleanor sitting with me in the greenhouse on a summer afternoon. We were sipping lemonade, her favorite wide-brimmed hat shielding her face. "You always think best among the flowers," she said. "One day you'll need to remember that." The greenhouse. Of course. I ran outside and down the gravel path behind the estate. The greenhouse was still there, overgrown with vines, the windows fogged with age. It had been shut down after Eleanor's fall. Madison hated the outdoors, claimed it made her itchy. I pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The scent hit me instantly, lavender rosemary and the ghost of lilies long since wilted. It took me a moment to orient myself. Everything was where it used to be, the cracked terracotta pots, the rusting watering cans, the empty planter boxes. And then I saw it. An old birdhouse tucked into the rafters above the western window. It wasn't there when I was a child. I would have remembered it was painted emerald green, the exact same shade as the necklace. I grabbed a step stool and climbed up. Inside the birdhouse was a velvet pouch, small, dusty. I pulled it out, heart pounding. I knew what was inside before I even opened it. The necklace, the Whitmore emerald. I slid it into my jacket pocket and climbed down slowly, knees shaking. Eleanor hadn't just hidden it, she'd placed it in a location only someone who knew her would ever think to look. Only someone who remembered the greenhouse. Remembered the phrase. Remembered who she was before all of this betrayal poisoned the roots. Back at Noah's, I laid the necklace on the table and stared at it for a long time. He whistled when he saw it. "That's not just jewelry." "No," I said quietly, "it's proof." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos of the will, scanned through Eleanor's signature, the date. Then I cross-referenced it with the label on tape 6 legacy items, transfer and final instructions. We hadn't listened to that one yet. I slipped the cassette into the player. If Claire finds this tape, she's passed the final test. The necklace is in the greenhouse birdhouse. If it is in her hands, then she is the only person who deserves the estate. If it's Madison, then everything I feared came true. To the court, I, Eleanor Whitmore, confirm that my final and full intention is for my granddaughter, Claire Whitmore, to inherit the Whitmore estate, including the property, the family trust, and all heirlooms, including the emerald necklace, which as of this recording is in my possession and stored separately. This message is being recorded to document that I am of sound mind, aware of the implications and acting of my own volition. Claire, if you're listening, you remembered where it started, which means you know where to take it from here. Noah and I stared at each other in silence. We had it. The missing piece. An audio confirmation, the physical necklace, the matching timestamp, and the will. It wasn't just a legacy anymore. It was a weapon, and I was finally ready to use it. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, though it was that too, but in energy. Sterile, stiff, like no one here wanted to feel anything, like truth and emotion were two separate currencies, and only one of them would buy justice. I sat beside Caleb at the polished oak defense table, hands clasped in my lap to keep them from shaking. On the other side of the room, Miranda and Madison looked like a curated magazine spread grief chic. My mother wore pearl earrings Eleanor had once promised me. Madison's hair was braided into a crown, the same way Eleanor used to wear hers at garden parties. Their attorney, Malcolm Ferris, was tall, silver-haired, and known for cleaning up ugly family drama with minimal blood. I'd done my research. He was ruthless, especially when it came to painting women like me as emotional opportunists. Caleb leaned over. "Stay calm. We present our evidence. We let the facts speak." "Do the facts usually win?" I asked. He didn't answer. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with no tolerance for theatrics, called the room to order and motioned for opening statements. Ferris went first. He began by calling me estranged, financially motivated, and sentimentally confused. He said I had reappeared only after the estate was finalized and was now clinging to an outdated document out of grief, not legality. Then, of course, he turned on Eleanor. She was by all accounts a brilliant woman, but in her final months, not immune to manipulation. Pain medications, cognitive fog, and the influence of a granddaughter who hadn't been active in her life for years. I kept my jaw still. I'd prepared for this, every word of it. When Caleb stood, he didn't argue. He didn't need to. He simply played the tape. This message is being recorded to document that I am of sound mind. My final and full intention is for my granddaughter Claire Whitmore to inherit the Whitmore estate. The room went silent. Even Ferris shifted in his seat. Caleb handed the court clerk a printed transcript time-stamped and signed by 2 independent audio engineers who had verified its authenticity. Then he displayed photos of the emerald necklace, the safe's empty interior, and finally the birdhouse. Then came the kicker. "I'd like to call our first witness," Caleb said, Dr. Pamela Lang. A small woman in her 70s rose from the back row and approached the stand. She'd been Eleanor's personal physician for over a decade, until she'd been abruptly dismissed 2 years before Eleanor's death. Under oath, Dr. Lang confirmed that Eleanor had no dementia, no cognitive impairment, and had never exhibited signs of mental decline until after Miranda had her removed. She was sharp as ever, Dr. Lang said. When I last saw her, Eleanor Whitmore was of absolutely sound mind. Caleb sat down. Madison shifted uncomfortably. Ferris stood. Dr. Lang, can you speak to Eleanor's mental condition after you were dismissed? Dr. Lang gave a thin smile. No, because I was never allowed to see her again. He paused. So your opinion is speculative. It's medical, she said evenly. You dismissed me. That doesn't make me wrong. The judge gave a brief nod, then turned to Ferris. Do you have any evidence to refute the claim that Ms. Whitmore's voice, will, and intentions were altered under duress? Ferris hesitated. Then in a move I will never forget, he stood and said, I request a recess to review this new material more thoroughly. Translation, they hadn't expected this. The judge granted a 48-hour recess. Outside the courtroom, Miranda brushed past me without a word. But Madison stopped. She looked at me like someone cornered. Not defeated, just exposed. Is this really what you want? She asked, her voice tight. To tear the family apart? I stared at her. You already did that, I said. You just didn't expect me to pick up the pieces. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You think you're the only one who loved her. I gave up 2 years of my life to take care of Grandma. I was there when you weren't. I held her hand when she cried out your name, and you didn't answer the phone. My throat clenched. But I held my ground. You weren't taking care of her. You were isolating her, controlling her. You don't get to rewrite that just because you smiled while doing it. She blinked. And then with a bitter smile, she said, fine. You want it, you can have it. But don't think this makes you noble. You're just the one who made the better move. Then she walked away. I stood there shaking. Not from fear, from fury. From the slow rising ache of finally seeing it all for what it was. Not just betrayal, not just theft. Legacy warfare. And I was finally playing to win. The second day in court felt different. Not quieter, just heavier. The weight of the evidence had shifted and everyone knew it. Miranda looked tense, still composed, but with the practiced grace of someone who'd just been dealt a losing hand and was trying to pretend the game wasn't over. Her fingers toyed with the clasp on her purse, a tell I remembered from childhood. She only did that when she was lying. Ferris didn't waste time. He asked the judge to delay the probate dispute until further medical evaluations of Eleanor's cognitive state could be conducted posthumously. He argued that while the tapes were emotionally compelling, they didn't carry legal weight unless backed by mental health records that proved Eleanor was lucid at the time of the recording. The judge asked him a single question. Do you have any such records contradicting Dr. Lang's statement? Ferris hesitated. We do not, Your Honor. The motion was denied. That's when Miranda made her move. She requested to take the stand. Caleb glanced at me surprised. I nodded, let her talk. My mother took the witness chair with the poise of a woman used to public scrutiny. Her voice was soft trembling in just the right places. I was never trying to manipulate my mother, she said. I was trying to help her. She was in pain. She was lonely. Claire was distant. She looked at me, eyes brimming with practiced sadness. My daughter and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's strong-willed, stubborn. I admire that, but she doesn't always see nuance. Family requires compromise. Claire sees everything in black and white. She folded her hands gently in her lap. When Madison came to stay with my mother, it wasn't some grand plan. It was necessity. Claire had her business, her life. Madison was available. And yes, I encouraged the change in the will, because I thought it was fair. Madison earned it. Caleb stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Whitmore, are you aware of any handwritten letters your mother left behind for Claire? Miranda hesitated. No. Are you aware of the tapes where your mother specifically names Claire as her intended heir? I've heard about them. So when you say Madison earned it, are you saying Eleanor was wrong in her expressed intent? No, she said too quickly. I'm saying she was confused. Caleb nodded, flipping through a folder. Are you also aware that during the 6 months preceding your mother's passing, over $40,000 was withdrawn from her accounts into one registered to Whitmore Holdings, a shell corporation under your name? She flinched. I was managing her affairs. So you used her money? I used what was necessary to maintain the household. Caleb turned to the judge. We have documentation from the bank confirming wire transfers into a company that has never paid taxes, never filed a return, and never employed a single person. It exists only on paper. Miranda's composure cracked. I gave my life to that woman, she snapped. She wouldn't even look at me at the end. She kept writing letters to Claire, hiding things. I had to do something. There it was. Not a slip. A confession. The courtroom buzzed, but the judge silenced it with one raised hand. She looked directly at Miranda. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore, that will be all. Back at our table, Caleb whispered, we just won. But I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I felt gutted, because beneath all her coldness, that outburst, that raw honesty was the closest thing to a real moment I'd had with my mother in years. She resented Eleanor for loving me more. And maybe she was right. But instead of facing it, she tried to rewrite it, replace it, steal it. And all she ended up with was a burned bridge and a permanent stain on her name. The judge called a brief recess. Outside in the corridor, I sat on a bench, staring at the floor. Madison walked past without looking at me. Then after a pause, she doubled back. Congratulations, she said flatly. You got your necklace, your house, your name in the paper. Was it worth it? I looked up slowly. I didn't want any of this, I said. I wanted my grandmother. I wanted my family. I wanted the truth. You think you're better than me? She sneered. No, I said. I think I was lucky enough to be raised by a woman who saw through both of you. She opened her mouth to reply, then closed it, and walked away. When court resumed, the judge was brief. In light of the evidence, I find that the handwritten will dated 6 months prior to the contested version is both legally valid and enforceable. The estate of Eleanor Whitmore is to be transferred in full to Claire Whitmore, effective immediately. The gavel struck once, and just like that it was over. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just breathed. Noah drove me home that night in silence. The emerald necklace lay in my lap, glinting softly in the low light of the dashboard. Now what, he asked gently. I looked out the window past the trees and the quiet streets of Ridgefield. Now, I said, I rebuild. The Whitmore estate looked different after the court ruling. It wasn't just the absence of Miranda's car in the driveway, or the silence that lingered in the air like a secret finally told. It was something deeper, like the house itself had exhaled. No more whispered schemes behind closed doors. No more footsteps echoing through halls filled with resentment. Just stillness. Just mine. I stood in the foyer for a long time, fingers brushing over the carved banister I used to slide down as a kid. The air smelled like lemon polish and old books. I remembered Eleanor's voice in this very room, her laughter after I'd broken a vase and tried to glue it back together with toothpaste. She didn't yell. She just said good improvisation. Terrible chemistry. That was Eleanor. Sharp but fair, stern but never cruel. I walked through the house like it was a museum of my own memory. Every room was layered with ghosts. Not the haunting kind, the guiding kind. She was everywhere. Her handwriting on recipe cards, her perfume in the curtains, her initials sewn into the lining of my old ballet bag still stored under the stairs. The housekeeper, June, the one Miranda had fired and then tried to erase, called me that afternoon. I heard what happened, she said. I wanted to say, thank you, for finishing what Eleanor started. She paused. I still have something of hers, you know. Something she asked me to keep just in case. My pulse spiked. What is it? Letters, she said. Dozens of them, all addressed to you, all dated after the date your mother claims Eleanor had stopped understanding time. I'll come by tonight. I met June at her modest home on the edge of town. She handed me a box tied with string, worn but well kept. I knew you'd come back, she said softly. When I got home, I opened the box on the dining room table, the same table where the will had been read aloud, where Madison had smiled like royalty. Inside were 47 letters. All in Eleanor's handwriting, all dated across 2 years. The first one started simply, Claire, if you're reading this, then I know the storm is finally over. She wrote about the daily things, what she planted in the garden, which tea she liked that week, her frustrations with Miranda's hovering, her joy when Noah's mother stopped by with pastries. and then slowly they turned deeper. She wrote about her fears that she wouldn't have time to correct the damage Miranda had done, that Madison was clever enough to pretend to care, that Claire would stop believing she'd ever mattered. I want to be clear, Claire. I didn't give you this because you were my favorite. I gave you this because you were my mirror. You questioned things. You thought for yourself. You didn't need to be perfect to be loyal. That's what legacy is, not obedience, not guilt. It's strength with memory. I read all 47 letters in one sitting. By the time I finished, I was crying not from pain anymore, but from release, from validation. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a mistake. I felt chosen. A week later, I hosted a small gathering at the estate. No gala, no press. Just people who had loved Eleanor without needing to own her. Caleb, June, Dr. Lang, even Noah's mom, a few former board members from Eleanor's foundation. We opened a bottle of wine from the cellar Eleanor had saved for a true damn occasion, and we toasted her. Not her death, her defiance. As the night wore on, Noah found me on the back porch. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said, rebuilding. Yeah. This house has a name, but maybe it needs a mission again. I turned to him. What are you thinking? Eleanor's legacy fund. The one she started, but your mother tried to shut down. What if we revive it? Scholarship women, fund education, set up mentorships, help other girls who've had the floor ripped out from under them. I blinked. That's exactly what she would have done. He shrugged. Well, you are her mirror. I smiled. We clinked glasses, and I knew what came next. 'Cause inheritance isn't just what you're given. It's what you decide to do with it. The Whitmore Legacy Fund launched quietly. No flashy galas. No champagne-soaked press releases. Just a single-page website, a simple mission statement, and a name that now meant something more than wealth. It meant survival, resilience, reclamation. Within a month, we'd received over 200 applications from women across the country. Some were teenagers kicked out by their families for defying tradition. Others were middle-aged women re-entering the workforce after surviving years of emotional abuse. A few were like me, quietly furious daughters who had spent too long apologizing for taking up space. Every story felt like a branch of my own. We selected 12 women for the inaugural cohort. Each would receive a grant mentorship and a weekend retreat at the Whitmore estate. I spent hours reading their essays by the library window where Eleanor used to sit with a highlighter and a legal pad annotating the world. She would have been proud. Probably would have criticized my font choice, but proud. The night before the retreat, I received a voicemail from Madison. It had been weeks since the ruling. I hadn't heard from her since that last sharp exchange outside the courtroom. Her voice on the recording was different. Not cold, not charming, just tired. Claire, I'm not calling to ask for anything. I wanted to say I read the letters. I went to June. I guess I needed to know for myself that it was real, that she really loved you, that she really didn't choose me. And she didn't. I still don't know how to feel about that. A pause. Anyway, I'm going to LA. There's nothing for me here now. But I hope you do something good with it. I think you will. Goodbye, Claire. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Forgiveness wasn't a requirement for peace. Sometimes peace was simply a closed door. The retreat weekend arrived on a crisp autumn morning. The house came alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. Laughter in the halls, suitcases clattering upstairs, women standing in Eleanor's greenhouse touching the same plants she once tended with the same calloused fingers. We sat in a circle on the back porch as the sun dipped below the Oregon pines. I told them my story, not every detail, but enough. The betrayal, the silence, the moment I stopped asking to be chosen and started choosing myself. One woman cried, another laughed in disbelief. All of them nodded like they'd lived parts of it too. That night, I took the emerald necklace out of its case and laid it on the table in the center of the circle. This isn't mine, I said. Not just mine. It belonged to my grandmother, and her grandmother, and every woman who refused to be erased. From now on, this necklace will go to one of you, every year, as a reminder that you're part of something unbreakable. One woman raised her hand. How will you choose? I smiled, the same way Eleanor chose me, by instinct, and by who remembers where it started. Later, as I cleaned up wine glasses and folded fleece blankets, Noah joined me in the kitchen. Do you ever think he said, rinsing a mug, that all of this, the house, the lawsuit, even the tapes, wasn't about the inheritance? What was it about? Making sure someone like you ended up with the story. I paused, dish towel in hand. Maybe I said, or maybe it was about ending the cycle. Miranda tried to inherit power through control. Madison tried through pretending. Eleanor gave it through truth. That's the only kind of inheritance I ever wanted. He dried his hands and looked at me. You ever think about what comes next? Every day. And I keep building. We stood in silence a moment longer, letting it settle the quiet not of emptiness, but of peace. In the other room, the women were singing softly. One of them played guitar, another was baking cookies, real ones, not metaphorical redemption cookies. It smelled like cinnamon. It sounded like healing. It felt like home. The morning after the retreat, I stood barefoot in the library, coffee in hand, watching the light cut across the old rug Eleanor had chosen herself in 1986. It was frayed now, one corner had been curled for years, and I remembered tripping on it when I was 8 and bleeding on the hardwood. Eleanor didn't scold me. She poured hydrogen peroxide on the cut and said, "You only bleed where it matters." At the time I thought she meant physically. Now I understood. This house had bled. Through every betrayal, every whisper, every theft, every time a woman in our family was told to be quiet, be graceful, be grateful, while someone else took what she'd built. But not anymore. There was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. Noah was in Portland for the weekend. Caleb was preparing the final trust settlement paperwork. The retreat attendees had all gone home the day before, full of cider purpose and unsolicited offers to paint the porch. I opened the door slowly, and there stood Uncle Daniel, Eleanor's younger brother, my great-uncle, a ghost from family reunions past. "Claire," he said, voice gravelly but warm, "you got a minute?" He was in his 70s now, tall white beard hands like old tree bark. He hadn't been around during the court battle. Hadn't shown up for the funeral. The family always said he was estranged. But Eleanor used to speak of him with this complicated fondness, like someone who'd once carried her through fire, then vanished into the smoke. "Of course," I said, stepping aside. He moved with a slight limp, but still had that stubborn dignity Whitmore's never quite grew out of. I poured him a cup of black coffee, and we sat by the fireplace Eleanor had insisted on converting to gas because real wood is romantic until someone has to clean it. He got straight to it. I saw the story in the paper, not the gossip one, the follow-up, about the foundation, the retreat. He took a sip, then looked at me. She'd be proud, damn proud. "Thank you," I said softly. He leaned back. "Your mother called me." Of course she had. "She wanted me to testify on her behalf," he continued. "Said I owed her. That Eleanor had always favored you, and that it wasn't fair." I waited. He smiled grimly. I didn't call her back. That startled me. Why not? "Because Miranda doesn't understand the difference between legacy and entitlement." He set his mug down carefully. "You do." We sat in silence a moment before he reached into his coat and pulled out a small battered envelope. "This is from Eleanor," he said. "She gave it to me 10 years ago and said, 'Only deliver this if the house ever truly changes hands.' I figured this counts." I took it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single page of thick stationery, the kind she only used for big decisions. It read, "Claire, if Daniel gave you this, it means you've done the impossible, broken the pattern. The house is yours. The name is yours. But more importantly, the peace is yours to protect. In the root cellar beneath the greenhouse, there is a box. My father buried it after the war. I dug it up when I was 21. What's inside doesn't belong to the family. It belongs to whoever finally remembers that legacy without healing is just a prettier kind of rot. Take it. Do with it what you think is right. Love always. Eleanor." I folded the note slowly. The root cellar. I didn't even know there was a root cellar. Uncle Daniel nodded toward the backyard. "I'll show you." The hidden door was beneath a thick mat of ivy behind the greenhouse, half buried in stone and moss. The hinges were rusted, but the lock was old school, just a latch. Inside, the cellar smelled of earth and iron and history. In the far corner was a small chest. We opened it together. Inside was a collection of documents, old ledgers, faded photographs, a revolver wrapped in linen, and a sealed envelope marked Confidential War Department 1947. My breath hitched. Daniel put a hand on my shoulder. Our grandfather was part of something off the books. Intelligence work. Things that shouldn't have happened. Eleanor tried to blow the whistle once, but it would have destroyed the family. She buried it, literally. I stared at the sealed envelope. What do I do with this? Daniel looked at me calm and steady. You're the one with the legacy now, and the power. We sat in silence. 2 generations in a dirt-walled cellar, holding a past too dangerous to touch and too painful to ignore. And I realized something. Eleanor hadn't just left me a house or a necklace or even a war of truth. She left me the ending of her story unfinished and trusted me to write what came next. And I would, because inheritance isn't just about what we keep. It's also about what we bury, and what we choose to dig up again. 6 months later, the estate was unrecognizable. Not because we'd repainted the shutters or restored the stone wall that Madison's SUV had once accidentally backed into. Not even because the greenhouse now flourished with rows of herbs, vegetables, and flowers planted by retreat alumni who came back every season like migrating birds. It was unrecognizable because it finally felt alive. No longer a mausoleum for secrets. Now it was a sanctuary. The Whitmore Legacy Fund had grown faster than I imagined. Word spread first quietly, then virally. A woman from Michigan wrote to say the retreat saved her life. A 22-year-old from New Mexico wrote to say it gave her permission to dream again. A grandmother from Baltimore called the house crying just to say thank you. They didn't just want the money, they wanted the mirror. They wanted to see someone stand in a house full of old pain and still open the doors wide. I stood on the front porch that morning with a steaming cup of tea in hand, wrapped in Eleanor's old wool shawl. A breeze carried the scent of rosemary from the garden. Inside, I could hear music playing softly. Billie Holiday just as she liked it. The kitchen buzzed with chatter from 2 retreat coordinators prepping for the next group's arrival. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about Miranda. And I thought about the moment I realized the house had always belonged to me, not because of a document, but because I never stopped showing up. My phone buzzed. A message from Noah. Got time for a walk this afternoon. Have something I want to ask you. I smiled. He still hadn't fully moved in, but he'd practically taken over the greenhouse plumbing and he knew where all the creaky floorboards were. That was enough for now. I replied only if it ends at the ridge. You owe me a sunset. He sent a thumbs-up emoji and a heart. We weren't rushing anything. Neither of us needed another relationship built on obligation. This was different. This was quiet, steady, earned. In the study, I added the newest photo to the growing wall of framed letters and heirlooms. A picture of the latest cohort, all of them in rain boots and laughing so hard, one woman nearly fell into the rosemary patch. Below it, a brass plate read, "We bloom where we reclaim the soil." The final task of the morning was in the root cellar. Since the day Uncle Daniel brought me there, I'd kept the sealed War Department envelope under lock and key. I'd scanned the contents, then consulted a friend of Caleb's who specialized in Cold War-era intelligence. The files inside documented something ugly, covert surveillance of American citizens, including Eleanor's own father. A man who had helped orchestrate programs now considered illegal and likely dangerous. Eleanor had chosen not to expose it. She hadn't wanted the weight of our family legacy to be poisoned further. She chose silence not out of fear, but control. And now that burden was mine. I made the decision 3 weeks ago. The files would go to a private archive with restrictions, a sealed contribution to a historical record stored under my name and my terms. I placed the envelope into the courier box and closed the lid with a soft click. Let the future handle the past. I had other work to do. That afternoon, I met Noah at the ridge behind the estate. We walked in silence for a while, listening to the wind thread through the trees. When we reached the overlook, the one Eleanor had taken me to every birthday until I was 17, he handed me a small box. My breath caught, but when I opened it, it wasn't a ring. It was a key to a small cabin on the far edge of the property, the one that had belonged to Eleanor's sister, long since abandoned and almost forgotten. She used to write there, he said. You said once you wished you had your own space to think, so I restored it. It's yours. I stared at him. I thought you were going to propose. He laughed. Someday. But today, I just wanted to give you space. And that was it. That was the difference. Not someone trying to possess me, but someone trying to protect what I'd reclaimed. That night I returned to the study, opened one final letter from Eleanor I'd saved for this moment. It was dated a week before her death. Claire, you're going to be exhausted. You're going to wonder if it was worth it. I hope you find this on a night when you feel proud but also scared, because I was scared too. I built everything I could in a world not built for women like us. I tried to leave you tools, not just furniture. I tried to leave you maps, not just money. But at the end of the day, what you build will look different. That's the point. I didn't want you to inherit my battles. I wanted you to win your own. Love always. Grandma Eleanor, I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest, and wept. Not out of sorrow, out of relief. Out of knowing I had finally arrived not at a destination, but at a place no one else could define for me. This was my inheritance. Not the house, not the wealth, but the strength to say it ends here, it begins here, and that no one could ever take away. What would you have done in my place? Would you have stayed quiet for peace or spoken up for what was right? Let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever fought to reclaim something stolen from you, your voice, your identity, your worth, hit like, subscribe, and remember, you are not alone, and it's never too late to reclaim what's yours.